Hello, thanks for tuning in again. It's Joe Simhart here. It's August 22nd, and today I like to talk a little bit about Gnosticism and its relation to delusional disorders. And it's a bit of a stretch because obviously not all people that believe in Gnosticism have delusional disorders, but there is somewhat of a relationship, I think, if we consider that the Gnostics, as we view them and in some aspects of today's New Age movements, feel that they are aliens, not of this world. In fact, a large proportion of Christians are taught that they are not of this world, that there's something dark and mistaken and sinful about this world, and our job is basically to live well and to ascend or escape or somehow live apart from this world, like the ancient Essenes did around the Dead Sea, or like modern communes do. You get the idea, but there is this sense, and I think a lot of human beings have this, and I have off and on throughout my life, is that somehow my spirit doesn't completely belong here, that it's from somewhere else, and that the idea of seeing things come and go and die and disappear and see the universe kind of eat itself, go into entropy and then become recreated again in some way. Is it normal that there's something eternal which is wonderful and life-sustaining in a spiritual sense, that's supposed to be normal? So having said that, I'm thinking of two things here. There was a young woman around age 30 that I encountered as a patient when she was brought to the hospital where I worked, and this is around 20 years ago, by police. And she had been on the streets. They brought her in like around 3 in the morning, and I was the main person on in the intake area at the time, so I had to process her intake for the psychiatrist to do an evaluation. She was thin, what I'd call wiry, sinewy, in other words, healthy. She had a backpack with her that weighed maybe 40 pounds, and I don't think she weighed more than 105 pounds. She was a small woman. She had a certain odor of the streets on her, although she was relatively neat. And the police said that they just found her sitting around somewhere in a park and tried to talk to her, and she was telling them some very strange things that made them believe she was unable to care for herself and that she was psychotic. So my job was to interview her, and I found out, and I'm going to be brief about this, that her story was that she appeared on Earth somewhat as a young adult from some outer space place, some star system, and that she appeared in this body, and this is, her mission was to explore the Earth and to stay in touch with whatever reality was given her until she was taken away again. So she had been living on the streets, more or less. I found out that she made somewhat of an income by painting and cleaning houses for people, and then moving on like a nomad in different places. And somehow she had ended up in Pennsylvania, and the police brought her in. Now, she wouldn't give me any history as to her background. We had no ID. We didn't know her real name was, so she was kind of a Jane Doe, and I forget what name we applied to her later. She was in our hospital for 9 months until she was released to a program that was more like an outpatient clinic where she could live, and she basically walked away from it within a week and took what she had with her and went about her life. When I went through her backpack, which I had to do because we're supposed to document all property, it was just layered like an archaeological layering of items that went from way back in her past, and everything was bagged in orderly plastic containers or bags, and and her more useful things were at the top of the backpack, and the rest of it she might have not seen for 20 years, maybe, from what I could tell, or at least 10 years. Let me put it that way. So there was a lot of mold at the bottom of this thing, and it was contaminated, and I had to go through this at a certain safe place outside the hospital office, actually, with gloves, and I got rid of about 30 pounds of stuff. It was just unsafe to keep it. And I kept what I thought might be significant for her. I mean, there was like spoons, broken pieces of plastic toys, any number of items, some paperwork that didn't indicate anything. There was something she saved from the newspapers, for instance. And I also deposited out of my own pocket, I think it was, some money for her to have when she left the hospital, because she had none. She stuck to her story the whole time she was in the hospital. They never gave her medications because she refused, and there was no reason to give her any because she was very compliant, very pleasant, kept to herself mostly, sat in the same spot by the same window every day, and sometimes I would come visit her and talk to her. She just was in a different space, a different headspace. Time seemed to be not a problem. She wanted to leave. She kept asking to leave the hospital. And like I said, after about 9 months, there was no reason to keep her. They had to turn her loose. So what was going on with her? Well, I'm going to look at symptoms in the mind again here very briefly. And in chapter 7, Delusions and Other Erroneous Ideas, it says that very rarely does anyone claim to be deluded. What the patient thought was a delusion does not usually prove to be so. A delusion is a false, unshakable idea or belief which is out of keeping with the patient's educational, cultural, and social background. It is held with extraordinary conviction and subjective certainty. So I think this woman was a young woman in the hospital, Jane Doe from another planet, was in this category of having kind of a fixed idea about herself and a delusional idea. She's kind of like a story of The Man Who Fell to Earth, which was based on a movie based on a Walter Tevis 1963 novel by that name. And the film was made by Nicholas Roeg in 1976 and starring David Bowie. And I recall seeing it a few times, but it was a similar idea that he just kind of fell to Earth from some other planet and had to live here as an Englishman in order to get water for his own planet, and then he fell into the delusional world of Earth, much like Gnostics believe we have when we came from the spirit world and are fallen into this material world. So where am I going with this? Because I want to end this. The escape is to maintain knowledge, gnosis of yourself, who you are, and not get trapped into the delusions of this world. And of course, there's a lot of strategies out there to this day, from cults to hypnosis workshops where you learn who you were in a past life, or who you really are, your essence, and then this explains the tension you have living in this world, and you try to resolve that by accommodating this world, in other words, faking it until you make it out of this world, or living apart in some way, like in a commune, or like this young woman did in a kind of a psychotic state, a delusional state, yet being functional. I mean, she could work, she was relatively healthy, she understood how to communicate with people, and she wanted to live alone, much like someone with schizophrenia, preferring to live in the woods or camp out, or, in other words, not be trapped in some kind of an environment like a hospital. Unfortunately, the law forced her to stay in our hospital. Where does this all go in the end? How do you reality test when you have a delusional disorder like this young woman did? And does it make a difference if you can't reality test? Well, it can if you become dysfunctional. I mean, let's say if she had an anxiety disorder, started feeling suicidal, wanting to get out of this world, cut herself badly, and then the police found her, well, there would be a reason for trying to protect her from herself and keeping her in the hospital. But in her case, man, after 9 months, I could see no reason why she should have stayed in our hospital. She was a functional, somewhat psychologically isolated, but pleasant human being that could have survived out there in the world and wasn't really harming anybody and was somewhat useful in terms of her function of helping to paint houses or clean things for people. Yeah, where does the disorder and the dysfunction and the harm come in when someone has these deep Gnostic feelings about who they might be, and who makes that judgment? I don't know in the end. I don't, I can't make a spiritual judgment on anybody that believes this sort of thing. But in terms of their behavior, if their behavior is such that they're harming themselves or coming up with some plan to harm society and we find out about it, then something has to be done just in order to protect the person from themselves and protect them and their behavior from others. So, basically that's it. Where does Gnosticism in a healthy sense end and a delusional disorder in an unhealthy sense begin? That takes some work and a type of analysis that comes with expertise in the fields of human behavioral health. And to some extent in that territory that we call cults, in terms of how we analyze whether as a group a group is going off in a direction which might be harming people or even harming themselves. All right, well, I'm going to let it go at that. Thank you for listening.